This is part 1 of a Q&A for the sugar diet. Enjoy.
Mark, can you explain G-Flux and how it pertains to the sugar diet?
Yeah, G-Flux is a unique relationship with the energy in and the energy out, I believe. And in terms of energy out, I believe, when you're doing the sugar diet, your energy out is going to be much greater. At least that's what I'm noticing so far. So it's kind of like a little bit different than people would say, move more and eat less. This is move more and eat more is what you're trying to do here. And when you're moving more and eating more, the idea, especially behind the sugar diet, is to really increase that metabolic rate. And you're going to do so with those sugars. Again, the sugar could potentially be helping to increase FGF21, which could be helping to regulate the metabolism, kind of kicking the metabolism into overdrive, having you burn up some of those carbohydrates, because sugar diet, you're eating fast-acting carbohydrates. And so it should not only allow you to perform better and for longer than normal, but your energy expenditure should be through the roof.
Okay, so you're doing the sugar diet. Isn't sugar bad for you? Won't it cause insulin resistance or diabetes?
It seems like in the absence of fat, that does not appear to be true. It actually seems to be the complete opposite of the truth. And I'm sure there's some variance amongst some people, and I'm sure that we'll get to the bottom of all this at some point. There could be genetic differences and so forth on how people, depending on where people come from and sunlight exposure and 9 million other things. But in general, sugar by itself is not bad for you. Sugar by itself is very rarely addictive. Like there's not people that are like really dying for like a scoop or spoonful of sugar cane. Whereas, of course, there's people that really love eating like a peanut butter cup, myself included, or a pizza. We get addicted to those things. Those things are easier to have a quote unquote bad relationship with. But with actual just sugar, it's kind of harder to have a bad relationship with it. And for people that have gotten to the point where they've had diabetes, they end up with what's called insulin resistance. That insulin resistance, just the way you made yourself insulin resistant, and just the same way that you moved your normal capacity for your body to regulate and work with insulin, you can actually move it in the other direction as well. So you can actually move it in a more positive direction. The way that you would move your insulin in a more positive direction is to become more insulin sensitive. The way that you'd become more insulin sensitive is to do it like kids do it. And kids eat sugar, and kids move a lot. So moving a lot and having sugar could potentially be not just something good for insulin resistance, because it's going to help you to become more insulin sensitive. Your body will need less insulin to clear the same amount of glucose. It can also be something that is going to really be able to help you to, it's kind of the word I'm looking for here. Like insulin, by becoming more insulin sensitive, you're going to be able to clear glucose a lot easier. And over time, you should be somebody that can handle more and more, not just like straight up carbohydrate, but even straight up sugar. The sugar diet, you are intentionally consuming fruit, honey, table sugar, things that are sugary, and maybe even some candy here and there. You're actually gunning for fructose and sucrose. You're trying to train your body to be used to this energy, and to train your body to have really great energy expenditure, but not just with activity, also even at rest. So we know that we can kind of train that insulin sensitivity, as I'm mentioning, either upward or downward. But we can also train that metabolism as well. You can increase your metabolic rate. There's a lot of ways to increase your metabolic rate. You can gain muscle, and that'll increase your metabolic rate. Even gaining fat increases your metabolic rate to some degree, a la like I'm wearing a 20-pound weight vest, right? If you're heavier, then your energy expenditure is going to be more. And it just takes more calories to run a 400-pound body as opposed to a 100-pound body, right? It takes more energy. We understand that. Everybody kind of understands that principle. But instead of being somebody that might be obese who really struggles with losing weight even on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, you now might be able to be that same obese person and lose weight on a 2,500 calorie a day diet. You say, how is that possible? Well, it's possible by increasing your insulin sensitivity and by increasing your metabolic rate via eating what everybody knows is already horrible for us, right? Which is sugar.
How do you avoid getting fat if you're eating so much sugar?
Oh my God, I almost forgot. Save that question. Back to the insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is going to happen easier with large amounts of fat and large amounts of protein. So I already mentioned that, sugar in the absence of fat is going to be a great way for someone to become very insulin sensitive. Sugar in the absence of fat, not consuming much in the way of fat calories, maybe keeping fat calories below 50, 60 grams a day would be a great way for a lot of people to start out to work on their insulin capacity, I guess you'd say, or insulin efficiency. And then also, some people might have to even lower the protein. There's been people who've been utilizing a low fat and low protein diet to heal people from kidney issues, from liver issues, from diabetes, from many diseases, including heart disease as well, by not just lowering the fat, but also lowering the protein. The protein seems to play some sort of role, and moms that are pricking their kids' fingers and checking their blood glucose because their kid is type 1 diabetic will tell you sugar and carbohydrates are not the only things that increase circulating blood glucose, but also things like protein, which you wouldn't think also moves the needle. We know that from people having things like whey protein and stuff like that. We've seen people, get that little bit of glucose spike from having something like a whey protein shake, which is super interesting. But for some people, lowering those proteins down, well, for most people, lowering those protein down is going to be something that is also going to help you to maximize having good insulin sensitivity. That is what you want. You want good insulin sensitivity. You do not want insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, when people are heavier, when people have more body fat, they're going to naturally have more insulin running throughout their body throughout the day, even without necessarily eating. Their resting insulin, their fasting insulin is going to be higher. And this is what people talk about when they say that someone is metabolically deranged or they don't have metabolic efficiency. This is what they're talking about, is that person at rest that's obese, or that's just, 60 pounds, 50 pounds overweight, which is almost all of America. That person has more insulin going around their system all the time. Insulin's not bad, and neither is blood sugar. But to have your blood sugar and your insulin constantly elevated all the time is definitely 100% problematic, especially when people are over consuming calories and when they're consuming fats as well. And so we want to try to become as insulin sensitive as we can, just like a little kid. A little kid seems to be able to burn those sugars right up. And they're so sensitive to glucose and so sensitive to this insulin spike that when that happens, they sometimes act like a crazy person. We sometimes notice behavior changes, almost like somebody just injected the kid with caffeine, right? Well, how come that doesn't happen when we're older? How come that doesn't happen when you're 30? When you're 30, if you drank a little sippy thing of apple juice, you're not going to run out of the office and go take 5 laps around the block. Instead, you're going to probably have the exact opposite happen because your insulin sensitivity is poor. It can be trained, and it's going to be trained by keeping your fats and your proteins low.
How do you avoid fat gain if you're eating so much sugar?
You're avoiding the fat gain by not consuming fat It's hard to gain what you're not giving the body. 96% of your fat can be converted into fat very easily. So if you're over your calories and you're over consuming fat, the likelihood that your body is going to take it from, is going to turn fat into fat to be stored in the body is high. It's the easiest way for the body to do that. But you're going to be reducing your fat, so it's going to be very difficult to become fat. On Thomas DeLauer's podcast, I think I asked him a question about, hey, if someone was like under 50, 60 grams of fat a day, could they get fat? And this was also, prompting like, hey, I'm not saying like somebody can't still overeat, right? But in general, it would be hard. It'd be hard to gain more body fat if you were only consuming 50 to 60 grams of fat a day. So it's something to consider, something to think about. But the way that you're not going to get fat on this diet is because the energy that you're consuming is primarily fast-acting energy. Fructose, by the way, doesn't need nearly the amount of insulin that sugar does, that regular and sometimes even, just higher glycemic index, carbohydrates and so forth, which I think is pretty fascinating. But you're not going to get fat on this diet because the energy that you're consuming is fast. It's going to hit you fast, and you're going to want to get it out fast. So your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, you just moving around, you're neat, just moving around more, having more energy, just like wanting to go to the grocery store more or whatever the hell it is, throw out the garbage, like all these things are all going to be exponentially increased a bit. It might only be like 5% in one person, might be 10, 15% in another person. They're going to be just like moving around, flying around a little bit more. On top of that, you're going to be enticed and encouraged to just move more. You're going to be enticed to like, you're going to find yourself, oh my God, I'm out on a walk again. This is amazing. Oh my God, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm, getting rid of the weeds around my house or whatever it is. Just all these little things that you don't normally do. You're getting up and down and doing the dishes more, or whatever it is. You're going to find yourself doing these things a little bit more. And when you exercise, you're going to be able to exercise way more intensely. You'll have way more reserve to act upon. On top of that, glucose helps to provide oxygen to the muscles. So your level of fatigue is going to be dulled. Your level of fatigue is going to be a little bit less. Your ability to fire the nervous system, your ability to do explosive activity is going to be increased. So just imagine if we had a med ball and I chucked a med ball to you and I was able to produce 800 pounds of force every time I chucked it to you because I'm eating some carbohydrates and eating some of these fast-acting sugars, and every time you threw it, you were only able to produce 200 pounds of force. Well, I'm going to be getting a little bit more out of that workout, and my energy expenditure is going to be higher. Things aren't nearly as relative as people would think. People would think, oh, well, if it's a hard effort for the other person, then they're getting like a similar activity. But it's not a similar activity. What I'm doing is I'm able to tap into muscle fibers more efficiently, and my output is increased quite a bit. Whereas the person that's throwing the med ball back to me that's doing 200, they just don't have that skill set. They have not gained that yet. And it's not just going to be from their nutrition, right? It's not going to be just their nutrition that's playing a role in it, but their nutrition could have a slight role in it. So let's use the same example, 800 pounds of force for me, and the guy throwing it back, he does 600 pounds of force. Maybe he's only doing 600 pounds of force because he's not on the same diet. In that case, if he just does the same diet, then he'll be able to put a lot more force, a lot more effort into every single thing that he does. Because of that, he might be recruiting more muscle fibers. It might be easier for him to gain muscle mass. It might be easier from week to week for him to get stronger, since his body is more sunk up and more coordinated with what it takes to get stronger. Like everything should be amplified by quite a bit when you find a diet that's performance enhancing. That's why originally in my book, The War on Carbs, That's why I talked about moving off of a strict ketogenic diet as you got yourself to be in better shape. I did not know this information about really submarining the fats and then even taking the protein down lower. I wish I did, because if I knew some of this information, I could have implemented that back then, and the performance enhancing diet that I wrote could have been that much more performance enhancing. But yeah, I did talk about lowering the fats a little bit, and I did talk about bringing some of those carbohydrates up, because I know and have known for many years that carbohydrates are great performance enhancers.
Is this diet just for cutting, or can you build muscle and or bulk too?
I would say this diet has really good leverage towards being able to burn a lot of body fat and to get really lean. I'm not sure, using fasting or intermittent fasting for like a bulk and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the best strategy, and to utilize the sugar diet for getting bigger. I would say this isn't the kind of diet where you're going to really put on a lot of fat, which some people like to do because they like to just change their body fat percentages for certain times a year. But in order to increase your fat, I think your body fat, all you would do is add a little fat to it. So if you wanted this to be a bulk, I would just say, rather than that really lean protein meal, maybe you have two protein meals, but maybe those protein meals both have a little bit more fat in them, and you're just giving yourself a little bit more leeway. Because I think over time, that's what I'll probably end up doing, is I'll probably end up adding a little fat back into the diet, maybe a little bit of protein, or having protein forward days, having days where I eat more protein, or having days where I consume a little bit more fat and protein, just kind of depending on how it goes. So you can use it for that. But I always like to promote the vertical diet for that specifically, because Stan did such a good job with the vertical diet. So I would strongly advise that you check that out. And Stan's diet is, very natural foods, rice, potatoes, and nowadays he's even promoting a little bit of sourdough bread. He's always been talking about orange juice, cranberry juice. He's been a fan of those things. And still, you want to keep your fat kind of modest, even on his diet, because you don't want just a ton of fat gain.
What's the role of FGF21 in this diet, and how does it impact the metabolism?
And we can look some of this up. We've talked about FGF21 a bunch on the show. So if you can look up some definitions for it, because I don't want to screw it all up. Sciencey stuff is not my strong suit. But it appears, and I'm sure that there's more than one cascade of, I think insulin's also at play in the sugar diet. You have high amounts of insulin, and insulin is very anabolic. And I think that your ability to store and utilize carbohydrates can turn you into a machine. It could turn you into an absolute animal. I mean, all the guys that you see on Sunday that are in the NFL or all, some, maybe not all, right? It's hard to always say all, but the Christian McCaffreys and just these freak amazing athletes that we see on the football field, they're eating a lot of carbohydrates. The TK Metcalf famously talked about his candy diet, where, he was eating 2 bags of candy every night, but people kind of missed the fact that he talked about nearly fasting all day. So there's a guy who intuitively was eating low fat, right? And then he's just consuming a bunch of candy. And then he's muscularity wise, he's unbelievable. He's completely shredded. He's, 225 pounds or something like that. He looks amazing. And so that guy already kind of landed on that particular diet, but this is a diet that's utilized, and Ryan's bringing up a couple of pictures of him right there. TK Metcalf, he looks ridiculous. He almost looks like a bodybuilder, but then he's running a 4.3 40, and he's a just fantastic football player. Pretty unstoppable at times with his height and his strength and ability to catch the ball. So he's an amazing athlete, but a lot of athletes are, they're not necessarily eating the same way that he does, and they're not necessarily eating, candy and sugar and stuff, but athletes are utilizing carbohydrates. There's not a lot of guys at the top that are utilizing keto. I mean, you don't even really see it in like golf. You don't see it much in like, you can probably get away with it in a sport like baseball, maybe, where there's not as many. I guess swinging a baseball bat's pretty explosive movement, but yeah, you just don't see it. Like they don't use it. And then there's always like the outlier, right? There's always like the one or two people where you're like, oh yeah, they do use that diet. You know, there's always like one or two professional vegan athletes, and then people point to that as being like the thing, but it just doesn't seem to work. Keto, carnivore, they just don't seem to work for that real high level next. It seems like there always needs to be an intervention of something else, you know? So if someone was to do carnivore and they were to do ultra marathons, it seems like they would need to throw fruit in there. Like, right? You got to mix other things in there. It just turns into a different diet. But yeah, if you can kind of read a little bit about FGF21 does, that'd be great.
Yeah, it says FGF21 is a hormone that plays a crucial role in regulating energy homeostasis and glucose and lipid metabolism. So more detailed look at FGF21. Regulation of energy homeostasis. It helps maintain energy balance by influencing factors like energy expenditure and glucose and lipid metabolism. As metabolic effects, it has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce fat mass, and lower blood sugar levels in animal models. And it's primarily produced in the liver. It acts on various tissues, including the brain, where it influences appetite and nutrient preference. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that gives us, you know, a lot of great information on like what this does. It does seem like maybe potentially that, along with insulin, are also responsible for being protein preserving. But it seems like if you're trying to really trigger that FGF21, that you not only want to sink your fats down real low, but you also want to sink down your protein to be pretty low. Some people are advocating for 60 grams of protein. There was a guy on my YouTube channel who said he's a physician and former bodybuilder, and that's what he was recommending to a lot of patients, was under 60 grams of protein per day. And that sounds like you're sinking them way down low. For me, I'm utilizing 100 grams of protein at the moment. I don't feel like I'm in danger of losing any muscle mass. You know, keep in mind, I still train. I'm training harder and heavier than I have in a really long time. Just did a bunch of belt squats the other day with 5 plates and a bunch of bands on there and stuff like that. And that felt really great. But I'm just also like doing farmer's carries and stuff with sandbags and picking up stones and just doing a lot of shit and just curls and stuff too. And like a lot of exercises that are, you know, just normal basic movements, but I am putting a hypertrophy protocol to them. So I'm not scared to lose muscle mass because A, I'm on steroids, and B, I kick ass with my training, and C, I think there's enough protein coming from the diet. We have to remember that, you know, the sugar diet, it calls for you to eat fruit by day and lean meat by night, basically. And there's some vegetables in there as well. Throw them in wherever you can or wherever you would like. Usually latter half of the day is where my veggies are. And then I also usually have some vegetables with dinner. And I'm trying to get my footing with vegetables since I am not that familiar. I don't normally eat a lot of vegetables. And so, you know, I'm being hippy dippy and I'm hanging out at Trader Joe's and like getting stuff that's already, you know, made. Cause like, I don't really know what the fuck to do with vegetables. So I'm still trying to, you know, learn all that. But, you know, the FGF21 and the insulin, along with, because your insulin's going to be higher because you're consuming these sugars all day, that I think there's not a lot of need to really worry about muscle mass. If you are concerned about it, don't lower your protein a ton at first and just get your feet wet with the sugar diet and just start it. But by triggering that FGF21, I think the more that you lean into that, I think the more helpful it's going to be. And I don't know if it's only FGF21 or if it's FGF21 and insulin, or I don't know exactly what's at play. But again, if we keep in mind, you know, the sugar diet is sugar by day. And when you're doing sugar by day and you're not consuming hardly any fat and there's hardly any protein in the berries and the fruit and different things that you're eating throughout the day, we can just speculate that your FGF21 is probably pretty high. your insulin levels are probably pretty high, even though they're regularly going up and down, because you're becoming more and more insulin sensitive. Insulin's also very anabolic. Your body's probably doing a great job of partitioning your glucose and sending the energy to the right areas. Hopefully your body is storing the glycogen in the muscle tissues and not sending it to the liver to be, part of, fatty liver, or sending it to your love handles or your ass, right? And so, I think FGF21 is playing a role here, but I think there's still a lot more to learn. And what I've always known over the years is that it's better to be an athlete than it is to be a nerd. Like, be an athlete first. Like, go lift some fucking weights first, ask questions later. Follow the diet first. Get in tune with it. Get in tune with your body, and then be a nerd second. Don't be a nerd first. Never be a nerd first. Be a nerd second. Have some curiosity going in. Ask some questions going in. That's cool. But let's not just, we're so scared that we're getting thrown into the deep end, that we just grab on to anything that we can on our way down. Like, hey, what about? It's always all the what abouts, right? You've got all these what abouts. What about this? What about that? And it's like, hey, just lose weight. Bro, you're 350 pounds. Let's get you to lose some weight. Let's get you to head in the right direction. Okay, now the weight's coming off. Okay, there we go. Now we can start. Let's talk a little bit more. Having the knowledge is great. And I realize there's a lot of people that won't even want to move forward without the knowledge. I realize that we're all different, but I think it's a good idea just to try stuff. A lot of this, like what I'm suggesting, and when it comes to this particular diet, this is very safe. There's absolutely nothing. There is zero danger in this diet. There's zero danger of causing any harm with this diet, unless you're just being completely reckless with something that I said. There's no harm that's going to happen from trying this diet. So eat your fruits and enjoy them. Drink your juice and enjoy that. But if you start going way out of your way to slam stuff, and you already have a metabolic or condition of some sort, then maybe you might screw something up. But just do all this stuff in a reasonable way. And like I said, try it out first, get into the teeth of some of these things, get into the middle of some of these things. And that's where you're going to start to wonder a little bit about, I wonder what's going on the inside. But do yourself a favor and just don't hesitate. Just get into these things.
Is there any risk to having your fats low long-term?
Potentially, there could be. We do hear a lot of reports that when people's fats are low, that their hormones start to get shut down. And we've heard that for many years from women, that women are all screwed up because they don't eat enough fat, because men seem to like to eat more fat than women for whatever particular reason. And then we also have heard from men, men having erectile dysfunction, and men having libido issues and just performance issues in general with the weight room or performance on the field, football field, or whatever it is, low energy. But all of those conditions are also not just from low fat, but they're also from low calorie. Those are also from low calorie. Those are also from a caloric deficit. So this diet in some weird way is putting you in a caloric deficit, but it's putting you in a caloric deficit at a much higher metabolic rate, because you're going to be able to eat more. You might be able to eat, you might be able to eat 3,000 calories on this diet, like Cole Robinson's doing. He weighs 166 pounds. He's chugging down, 3,000 calories. And when you're chugging down 3,000 calories and you're still losing weight, technically, you're supposed to be still in a caloric deficit. If you're dropping weight, that's the definition of it. So how does somebody lose weight when they're eating 3,000 calories? Well, they increase their metabolic rate by consuming this sugar, and this sugar is assisting them with not only burning more calories and just in general increasing their metabolic rate, but it also is encouraging that person to lift and train harder, lift and train more. Some people listening might say, well, I don't really know if I'm going to train that much or train that. I don't know if I even train that hard. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. You're going to start to regulate your appetite on your own. That might take a little bit of time. You're going to start to regulate your movement on your own as well. But, as always, I'm going to encourage you to move. I'm going to encourage movement. I think movement is critical, but you're going to want to move as you continue to do this diet a little bit more.
Have you noticed any difference with your satiety with lesser protein?
No, because I'm eating a lot of fruit, and fruit has fiber in it. And so fiber is also something that helps with satiety. I thought that would be an issue, but it's really not. And I really look forward to the meat at the end of the day. Like I'm eating a lean source of meat at least once a day at the end of the day. Sometimes two lean sources of meat, or sometimes two, like a double dinner type deal. But usually just one. Last night I had scallops. I really like those a lot, and just hammered that. Tonight I have a flat iron Piedmontese steak that I'll be cooking up, and I'll probably have that with a Japanese sweet potato. Probably throw some salt and honey on all that stuff, and I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be awesome. Yeah, but I have not noticed extra hunger. What I have noticed is that when I'm hungry, I eat. So unlike other practices and other things I've done before, I'm like, you're just kind of only like, you got some fake hunger going on. Don't really worry about it. Just tough it out, and we'll just make it to the next meal. And I've done that before and done it successfully, and it's worked here and there, but it doesn't work great, continuously. I do want to go back to the fat question about the fat. Like, can this diet at some point wear out its welcome in terms of like you being super low fat? I think it potentially can, especially if that really low fat starts to mess around with your hunger, because protein and fats together can really help dampen hunger. If you were to eat like a ribeye or something, like, man, that really is super, not just satiating, but satisfying. Like, whoa, like what was that? It's super good. Or a tri-tip or something like that. Those foods kind of have a lot of value. But again, going back to that idea of like, people messing up their hormones via low fat, they usually are low calorie as well. And not much is known about this situation here where you're eating more. So I haven't noticed being hungry, because on this diet, the whole idea of it is to eat more. The idea of this diet is not to like eat sugar. And the idea of this diet isn't to like hammer candy. The idea of this diet is to eat whenever you want and eat amounts that get you out of being hungry. I don't want to just say like eat as much as you want, because I've kind of said that before, but that might be misleading to some people. But I think that you kind of can eat as much as you want, but eat when you want. And the only thing you're changing is you're just not eating whatever you want. So eat whenever you want and eat as much as you'd like, maybe with the caveat of being somewhat reasonable. And the other part of that is you just don't get to eat whatever you want.
If like down the road you switched back to a keto style diet or carnivore, do you think that you would have to bump your protein up, or do you think you'd just kind of experiment with keeping your protein lower, like what you've been doing with the sugar diet?
Yeah, keep in mind, I've been a fake ketoer for a very long time. Like real keto is low amounts of protein as well. So I haven't really done a lot of actual keto where your proteins are, like pretty much half your body weight. And then, so I think, maybe we can even look this up a little bit. Like what percentage of your diet is like what percentage of your diet is protein if you're on a clinical ketogenic diet? Maybe see if we can find information on that. But I think it would be like 100 grams of protein a day, and it'd probably be like 300 grams of fat. which is just like, there's a lot of fat. So I haven't really done that particular style that much, although I have done it before. You finding any answers over there?
Yeah, it says if you're on a clinical ketogenic diet, the type used therapeutically for things like epilepsy, it typically follows a very strict ratio of macronutrients. The classic keto ratio is 90% of your total calories come from fat, 6 to 8% come from protein, and 2 to 4% from carbs.
So that kind of falls in line. Like that's not far off from the rice diet. You start to notice a theme here. It's like some macronutrients getting whacked. Some macronutrients is getting completely smashed. And in both cases, it's protein, which is interesting. The rice diet calls, I think, for like 5% or 2% protein. It's crazy, right? Doesn't seem to make any sense. Why are we just clobbering protein? It's frustrating because we love protein, right? Even on a ketogenic diet, for me, I modified the ketogenic diet to have more protein in it. And that's where I started making other modifications. When I started doing that years back, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I also started to lower my fat. And guess what happened? I got leaner. I got in better shape. I got in way better shape doing that. It made a huge difference. And I was talking to my brother about that a lot. I was trying to convince him and a few other people, like, man, you can't just hog out on fats the way that you think without some sort of consequences. It's difficult to lose weight, and in fact, you might gain weight by eating large amounts of meat and large amounts of fat. I know some people are like, oh no, you can't out eat this. You can't out eat these diets. You can. I think you can out eat any diet. If you're just being unreasonable and you're just hogging out, I think you can do it. And different people have different abilities to eat like a crazy amount of food. But I think with this diet, because you can eat whenever you want, and because you can eat, like, look, if you can, every time you're hungry, if you can have an apple, a banana, some blueberries, some raspberries, some blackberries, you got all this like variety of fruit that you could have. If you're going to work, like pack some stuff with you for work so you have like more than one option. So you're not always just like stuck with one thing. Pack some vegetables. You got some carrots, maybe some celery, maybe some peppers. Peppers, by the way, are amazing. You ever just eat peppers, like red peppers and yellow peppers? Fucking awesome. They kind of taste like an apple, but they got like a little spice to them. They got like a little snap to them. They're great. And when you have that much variety, you don't really care that much. Your food cravings go down a lot. Now, I'm not somebody who, I was obese. I was way overweight, clinically obese for sure. But I don't think I ended up with the same mind as a normal obese person, because I didn't end up obese kind of, I don't know how to say that in a nice way, but I'm trying to figure out like how to say basically, I got big for powerlifting on purpose. Like it was part of what I was doing for powerlifting. And then I just got like a little too big and I got a little too fat. It just got out of control a little bit. But I wasn't like so turned that other direction to where I couldn't go back the other way. Finding the road back home was not easy. But I've been in pretty good shape since I was like 18 years old. I've had some ups and downs with like body weight and body fat percentages and so forth, but I've been training the entire time. I've never stopped. And there's always been a diet. I've always been on a diet since I was 16 or so. I found out about body opus and Dan Duchesne and low carb stuff. And before that, I did the zone diet. Like I was always, and some people might think like, oh, you're always on a diet. Huh? I didn't know that. It's crazy. They think like being on a diet's like a bad thing. Like, oh, he's on a diet kind of pretty much when he was like a kid. It's like, no, it was great. Like I was like 240 pounds. I didn't know much about nutrition. And I'm like, oh, I want to get like a little leaner. I knew about training because I was a big, strong kid, but I didn't know that much about nutrition. I started finding, I'm like, oh, I eat way too many carbs. What's going on over here? And I didn't really realize that not only was I eating too many carbs, I was also eating too much fat. I tried a diet from my uncle. He was like kind of doing bodybuilding. I was like, there's no fat in this. There's like no leeway. It's too strict. And he was like, you know, you got to like meal prep. And like, I was like, I don't even understand what he's talking about. I'm too young. I don't get it. So I didn't understand a lot of that stuff. And that was just like too confusing for me. But I went my own route and was utilizing different diets from the time I was a kid, basically. And I've utilized all of them. That's why I'm making such a big deal about this. Like some people might be like, I don't understand why he's making such a big deal about this. I'm making a big deal about this because this is a big deal. This is, it may not be completely novel. Like who the fuck cares where it came from or when it came out or who was the OG of it or whatever. Fine. There's people that have been doing it for a while. The vegans, sure, they got some good arguments. They got some great points. There's Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. There's Durian Rider. Like I'm aware of all these people. I know about it. I'm aware of it now. I'm in it now. But now it's just like, hey, let's just share it. Like who gives a shit about where it came from? It works. It's extremely effective. I haven't seen anything like this before. I haven't seen anything like this in the diet community. I mean, this is very, very powerful. The biggest thing that happened in all of dieting and all of nutrition was people realizing that exercise and diet done religiously, done collectively for really long periods of time works really great. The other thing people realize is that they're hard to do. And the next thing that people realized was that we're just going to keep getting fatter and fatter because it's so hard to have adherence to the particular diets, and it's hard to gain some sort of consistency with your exercise. Adherence to the diet, let's go back to that. That's like the most important thing, is to be able to do it. Compliance is the science, says Stan Efferding, right? Compliance is the science. Can you actually do this? If you can't do this diet, if you're like, I don't even like fruit, I don't even like vegetables, well then maybe you just find a different diet. That's what's great, is like a lot of these diets work, but can you be compliant to whatever the other one is that you're trying? And the reason why I have hopped around and done so many different diets, because I'm always like, that sounds pretty good. I think I can do that. But I haven't literally tried every diet. I've never done a vegan style diet. Maybe for a day I've been vegan, but I've never tried it for like months on end or anything. And why haven't I tried it? Because I don't think I care to do it. I don't think there could be compliance from me. I feel that it's important. I feel like there's good nutrients in meat, and I just have my own philosophies on animals and people and the earth and so on that I just maybe think a little differently than some of the people in that community. And it's fine. Not a big deal. They think differently than me. I think differently than them. Cool. We could still trade some good information, and there's still a lot to be learned. Durian Rider, he is a vegan, but there's still a lot to be gained from learning from someone like that. This diet is a big deal, and I can't stress that enough. There's a reason why on my last live, we were up like we had like 300% increase in the amount of people that were on the live thread, and we started getting 300 comments, 400 comments, 500 comments on some of the stuff, and it's not like, hey, you're an asshole, I can't believe you're shilling out another diet thing. And there's a couple comments like that, but most of them are like, hey, I've been on this diet for 20 days and I lost 8 pounds. Somebody else is like, hey, I've been on this diet and I haven't lost weight in 4 years previous, and I'm down to 190 pounds, and I was 205 when I started. And there's some people saying, hey, I've been doing this diet for a while. I was made aware of this from Durian Rider, and I lost 80 pounds. There's other people saying I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And if you go down the rabbit hole of looking into this stuff, you'll find the honey diet. You'll find Anabology talking about this stuff. You'll find Cole Robinson talking about this stuff. And you'll find some of the people in the vegan community communicate somewhat about a similar plan or similar diet. But even a lot of people are still like, there's vegans that eat like shit, right? And there's carnivores that eat like shit. A lot of times it still has to do with adherence. A lot of times they can't actually follow like a vegan diet where you eat vegetables and fruit and you're consuming enough nutrients, mainly macro, but the micro is huge too, right? That sounds actually like a pretty good diet. Okay, it might be missing this or that. It might be this amino acid. You might have to eat that, or B12, or I don't know, whatever somebody wants to kind of make up. Sure, maybe there's some arguments for some of that stuff. Sounds good. But even a lot of people that are vegan, they're eating like the vegan brownies, the vegan donuts, and like that's where we get sidetracked. And that's where we got sidetracked with keto, and that's where we got sidetracked even with carnivore, where I just think that people, they're not adhering to it. And they're not adhering to keto. So what happens when you're keto for 3 days and you're eating, 250 grams of fat, most of it being saturated, and then day 3 you cheat on the diet. And then you get down the road 5 days, 5 days keto, 250 grams of fat every day, and you cheat again. And you're like, having a hard time with this. I hate the, checking the ketones and all this stuff. I'm going to do carnivore. And you try carnivore and you, again, same thing. You do it for 3 days, 6 days, 7 days. And you always have this little spell where, a binge comes in or a cheat comes in. It's like, what are the consequences of that? And how come I never hear anybody discuss that? Because now you're on a mixed diet plan where you're eating, well, not even a mixed diet plan. You're basically on full blast, the SAD diet. You're on the standard American diet via the carnivore diet and via keto, because you're restricted for a handful of days and your body is craving sugar so much that you overcompensate by blasting tons of sugar. And now if we were to look at your macros for the month, they would probably be maybe not identical to the standard American diet. The only thing I would say is like, you might get like a little one gold star for maybe you're eating like a good amount of protein. And that would be about it. The rest of it would be a huge miss, because there would be way too much fat in there and there would be way too many carbohydrates. What's the impact of that on your blood pressure over time? What's the impact on that of your lipid profile? What's the cardiovascular impact of being on like a mixed diet like that? You think you're keto, you think you're carnivore, you tell everybody that you are there, but then secretly you're not really ever losing weight. You're still 50, 60 pounds overweight. I think we can agree that does not sound like a great practice. So I think that it's a good idea to be in search of different diets so we develop different skill sets, and so we can figure out what's going to feel best for us. Because all of the diets work. You could make me do whatever diet, and if you just served it to me and that's all I ate, then I could lose weight with it. Or maybe it's not even about weight loss. Maybe it's just about like having decent hormones. If you just provide me with that and I ate that, and I'm supposed to have like, good markers of health, whatever the hell we determine those things are. If I only ate that, then that would work. But that's not the way humans work. We don't work that way. We end up having cravings. A lot of times the cravings are simply just sugar. And I don't think that I was really, I guess I sort of knew it because I was having like fake sugar, but now there's not even a need for fake sugar. You just throw it all out the window if you want. You could still utilize it if you'd like, because it's not a horrible idea to sometimes have things that just aren't so calorically dense, right? But at this point, we don't even need it. You can just buy the regular Gatorade. You don't need to buy the Gatorade Zero. And dude, when you go to the gas station and you stop in and you grab a regular Gatorade and you drink it, oh my God, Gatorade Zero tastes like shit in comparison. Gatorade Zero is not bad, but shit, the Gatorade with the sugar in it is awesome. And Gatorade is amazing. I think Gatorade is like half fructose and half sucrose or something like that. It's even better for like the uptake of glycogen. It's like amazing. It's a great formula. Or at least it used to be. I don't know, like they changed it, but it's amazing. And I've been guilty of all this stuff too. I know that what's that big Liquid IV? Liquid IV, when they first came out with some of their hydration products, guess what they had in there? They had straight sugar in there. And I think they still do. I still think they sell their original formulas. And people were like in an uproar. And so they had to make, I don't know if they had to make it later on or if they offered it right off the bat, but it seemed like later on they had to make ones that didn't have sugar in them because everybody was in a panic. But I've been saying this forever. Carbohydrate. It helps hydrate the muscles. It helps, like literally, whatever you're having with your sugars, if you're having magnesium and sodium and different things with your with the sugar, it should, at least it's my belief, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm totally fine with that. But all those nutrients that are in there, those micronutrients that are in there, the minerals, vitamins, and so forth, those things should be getting transported into the muscle cells because of the sugar. And that was the original selling point of like Celtech 9,000 million years ago, is they had a Celtech product that had creatine in it. And they just sold these giant tubs and they were heavy. They're like 4 pounds, 5 pounds. Like a 2 pound looking tub being like 5 pounds is weird because you're used to it, like used to the size of these protein tubs. You're used to them weighing a certain amount. Usually they're light because it has protein in it. But Celtech had creatine and sugar in it. And so it was super dense. The thing was like heavy as shit. And you would get it and it would all be like mashed down like a ton but then I remember even as a kid, I was like, why am I consuming all this sugar? This doesn't make any sense because I learned about like low carb stuff early on. I think it's to the left there, second one in. Celtech. I think, do you see that one? Yep. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Yeah, dude, that was just like, and I think they would sell that for like, I don't remember the price at the time. It would be like $50. They must have made so much money off that because it was literally just, you're just scooping in sugar. But it was sugar and creatine coming together. And sugar and creatine coming together makes a lot of sense. That's originally when Bill Phillips first put out creatine, he's the first guy to get creatine to the market. He was creatine and sugar. He would say, have it with some grape juice. And then these guys made it with like grape powder, or grape flavored powder, whatever the hell their carbohydrate of choice was with that thing, probably dextrose. But yeah, that stuff was like insane. And you drink it and you'd be like, oh my God, it was way too sweet. It was almost like a syrup, it was like kind of gross. But yeah, you were getting jacked. You're getting the benefits of the creatine. But the idea was what I just said. It was like you're trying to transport that creatine into the muscles via having some of those carbohydrates in there. So it's just interesting. It's super interesting.